So we've assembled your guys' questions, and I've been going through them, but I think I'm going to answer the last one first. There's some really great process questions here, and that's where I'm going to start. The last question I got here is from Steve W., who describes having gathered materials for a solar power project a while back, and he had everything worked out how it was going to go, and then COVID hit hard, and then the panels were on back order, and the lumber got scarce, and the necessary materials are available, but now it's winter, now spring, and he's mostly forgotten how he planned to build this project. So here's his question. Is there a way that I record my build ideas other than plan drawings that allow me to set the project aside for an extended period and come back to it and pick it up where I left off? Yeah, it's an imperfect system, but yeah, and it's been hard won, right? Because for the longest time, the largest archive for me was visual, pictorial. Everything, if I was going to do the pain box from Dune, I'd be gathering tons and tons of pictures of it. Now, in addition to pictures, I'm also gathering all the information I come across, like size or an interview with the prop maker, and they have information. So the programs I use for this are twofold. For the visual and pictorial reference, it's all Adobe Bridge. Which, yeah, Adobe Bridge is amazing. Right now with my M1 chip, it's a little bit choppy, but that's just because there's a delay in the software. They're writing the software to make it native for the M1 chip. It just hasn't happened yet. But Bridge is an incredible piece of software that changed my life. And I bang the drum about it all the time. Hold on. Excuse me. But the other piece of software is Evernote. Jamie and I did some work promoting Evernote back in the day, and we actually have a little equity in that company. And it's an amazing product for being able to allow me to access my research materials in any format on any machine. And I find Evernote to be stunning for that. So I grab and throw things from the web into Evernote all the time. And so every folder in my creative projects folder probably ends up with a corresponding Evernote file that is where I save all the information, the measurement information, the construction information, the materials, who built one. When I get all the way into a project, I want to collect everything anyone has ever done with this. So I'll collect all the fan builds of it. I'll collect all the repros that have been done by companies over the years. But you asked about coming back to it. I also, for big builds, I make a lot of notes on paper in my sketchbook. And that's partly, as anybody who's gotten past a certain level of skill of making, I do a lot of problem solving on the paper. I do a lot of proportional problem solving, aesthetic problem solving, and also even mechanical. Like, you know, if I'm trying to marry two different things and I'm not sure how the planes are supposed to meet, I often have to draw it out just to be able to see it in my head. That being said, all that being said, I don't mean to give you the impression that I have a perfect system, Steve W., because I often come back to projects and wonder exactly how to start up. Okay, not often, but it still happens. Actually, I'm going to tell the opposite kind of story. So there is this amazing papercraft model of the bathhouse from Spirited Away. It's about $400 or $500 to buy this model. And I'll tell you, it's worth every penny. Yeah, they're on Amazon, they're on eBay. Some people charge more, don't pay more. It's the same model. I think $375, $400 is about the cheapest they are right now, and they're laser cut paper models. And actually, there's a full set of models of the entire town. There's the places where the parents were eating, and there's a ton of the buildings and the amusement park building they walked through at the beginning of Spirited Away. All this is from the film Spirited Away. Anyway, at this point, 8 years ago, I was going on tour in 2013, and I bought this model and I took it on tour, and on tested, we did some videos of me building this model. And then at the end of that tour, basically we stopped doing those builds because no one was watching them. So I packed up that piece. I planned to work on it, and I didn't get around to it until Christmas of this past year. And I pulled out this box that I hadn't touched in 9 years. And there was a couple of Post-its from me, and the instruction book was open to the right page. It took me about 5 minutes, and I realized exactly where I was in the build. And I was like, past me, give me a big old high five, because that feels awesome. And that's one of the reasons that I don't often lose track of where I am in a project, because I love setting future me up for success. Like that's a fun frame for me to think about. Yeah, so my attack on this is threefold. There's a visual reference, pictorial, there's a informational reference, and then there is a drawing reference. And I mean, the thing about drawing for me, someone once said this quote to me, I'm not writing it down to remember it later, I'm writing it down to remember it now. The fact is, I make tons of drawings and I review them less frequently than you would imagine. And it's specifically because the act of drawing is the act of putting something in here. It's like one of the inputs for my mental palace for builds. The crafty collector wants to know when I'm going to get around to painting my Dune Pain box, because they want to get started on theirs and they would love some tips. Okay, let's talk some process, crafty collector. That is their username. Sure, let's talk about painting this. First up, the model that I have is a beautiful 3D print, but it's translucent. Right? You can see through it. So the first thing I would do is I would hit this with several coats of primer, several coats of a black primer, methinks, in order to make it totally light proof. I would concentrate on the inside first, because you don't want to be painting the inside after the outside's all done. You want to get the opacity going early. So I'd probably paint the inside first, make sure it's dry, then start to paint the outside with several coats. Then the prop master themselves actually posted pictures on their Instagram of the box as delivered. And there are angles, I think there's only one side that hasn't been fully seen yet. But it looks very much like a tiled mosaic construction in its paint job. And so my approach to painting this will be first to print up all the clear views I have with it as large as I can make them on paper. Because while I store everything digitally, when I am using painting reference, I don't want my laptop sitting here on the table. It's an expensive bit of kit and I don't need it near the dust and the solvents. I got polishing compound all over it last week. So it's best if I don't bring my laptop into the cave. But even more than that, I get more from looking at the reflective reference of a print on a piece of paper than I do looking at the additive light from a backlit screen. I feel more of a pass-through of the color information from the print. So for every build, I print out a bunch of stuff. I mean, just all over the cave are piles of paper, and this one's for the gun case, and this one's for that piece, and this one's for the Moby Dick thing. And, you know, those printouts become really important. And it's why I invested in a good laser printer. I have a laser printer I love. We'll list what model I have because I find it really robust. And I use laser printers because sometimes I use the paper here. So the Louis Vuitton gun case is going to get a couple of layers. I found this beautiful steamship from New Zealand sticker, and here's a one from New York, K-Line World Service. So I'm going to cut these out and put these on the actual gun case. They're laser printed because if I hit this with water, they won't run. If they're inkjet printed, they'll totally run and they'll wear, and the inkjet prints just aren't nearly as archival. I'm not sure that the laser prints are technically archival either, but boy, they last a lot longer and they take weathering. So yeah, get out the reference, print out the reference, put it here. Okay, and then I would probably give this a base coat of a kind of a neutral color that, like, if anything didn't get painted, you wouldn't mind seeing it. But then to paint this, I think the method is going to be figuring out the map of color, right? So once I have my reference out, I'm going to notice, okay, I'm looking at these bricks, and while there's like 40 different variances in color, there's like 5 major subgroups. I'm not sure what there are, but I'm just estimating. And then I would be like, okay, so that's a dark turquoise. This is kind of a mid-teal. This is a taupey gray. And this is a, so I would start to try and get those colors. And then I would actually start to like mask out groups of the tiles that are visible on the surface and paint them. Now, when you're doing a paint job like this, where it's a monolithic object that I need to make look like it was built out of mosaic tiles, there is something I know from an institutional standpoint, which is it's going to suck until it's great. What I mean by that is, as I start painting these groups of panels and following the color mapping of the original prop and attempt to translate it to this and do that, each stage is going to look terrible to me. It's going to look, there's going to be like 5 good, it's not quite right. Each stage as I paint is going to make me feel like this isn't going well. But I know enough to push through until I have painted all my major blocks. And then when you get to tie them together with some washes, all of a sudden it really does start to come together. If it turns out I've gotten some of the colors way off or some of the mapping doesn't quite work, at that point, I can start to remask and repaint pieces and retie them in, and it's going to be a much more organic process at that point. In fact, I guarantee you that's probably going to happen, and that's also probably going to help make it feel like these are separate tiles put on. It's hard to paint something to look like mosaic after the fact. We humans are bad at generating what look like random patterns, but boy, can we tell when they're not random patterns. Yeah, I know, isn't that funny? Like, one of the ways the IRS catches people who are cooking their books is by checking the specific distribution of the last digit in the number, because there are mathematical consistencies and humans are bad at following them. Yeah, I know. So I think that's roughly covers how I would do this. I think I would start with airbrush for each of the pieces, but I might end up doing a lot of brush work to bring this all the way home. And then on the final thing, I would probably hit it with 3 or 4 coats of a semi-gloss or a matte, just to give it a kind of a depth, because there is a way in which this thing feels like it's made of stone, and stone isn't necessarily perfectly opaque out to its edge. Sometimes it has some translucency to it. I know I talked about making this light proof, but like, there are ways to imitate that look with deeper, multiple layers of clear coats. Yeah, that's the rough approach. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.